Welcome to This Is Nintendo.
You can't just say Nintendo.
Nintendo came out with a new console. So it's time for another tier list of us ranking every Nintendo console F to F. They're all F.
You're just being a hater.
Every single one of them is an F.
You're just being a hater immediately. I'm just gonna rank it purely based on which of these consoles has Armament RTS, and the answer is only one.
First one, we got the original DS.
So this is all DS's.
This is the DS generation.
My thoughts on the DS is that it is and remains to be one of the most impressive gaming consoles of all time. I am of two minds of this one. For two screens, no. On one hand, objectively, I think this still is the most successful console that Nintendo have ever brought out. And I think that there's a real argument that handheld gaming consoles peaked with the DS. If you think about what happened after with like the 3DS and the Vita and whatnot, everything kind of started going downhill as smartphones took over. But the DS was kind of like right at the end. It was actually kind of like the pinnacle.
I never had a DS. It was like that time in high school when you're like, oh, it's lame to like
play
Game
Pokemon?
Boy and Pokemon.
Yeah.
And then you get to college, you're like, wait, no, it's totally cool again. Looking back on the interface, I'm like, I hate this.
There were things
Like-
that Nintendo did here, though, that were really important. The DS was actually like a major risk for Nintendo. They had been so successful with the Game Boy, then the Game Boy Color, then the Game Boy Advance. The DS, remember, was not actually originally going to completely replace the Game Boy. This was going to be a third pillar.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a solid B.
I think that's very fair. Because think about it. All of these consoles are pretty good, right? With maybe one or two exceptions.
Well,
The Wii U's obviously F.
Well.
I mean, obviously. That's pretty good. The Game Boy Advance.
S.
What the hell is wrong with you? What?
This is where my nostalgia nipples start to tingle. Like,
Literally any other word would have been a better one.
well, it's
than
alliteration.
No, I
They
don't.
teach you that in English class.
But we're not just purely ranking on nostalgia vibes.
We literally said, that's literally what you said we're doing is vibes.
I also played a lot of Game Boy Advance, but I can be more neutral and fair here.
I'm not neutral and fair whatsoever.
My thought would be, while the Game Boy Advance was a solid console, but I think there are a few things that knock this down, certainly off of S. First of all, this was still in the old school era of no backlit screen,
Yep.
AA batteries.
Yep.
Also, the Game Boy Advance, while it was a cherished platform and it had a lot of performance, it was very much like a portable, like Super Nintendo or something. If you're going to give some points to importance, this was a very, very safe upgrade. The original Game Boy, I think, should get some extra points, as does the DS, for being different and unique. The Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance were very iterative updates. If you want to talk crap about how the Switch 2 isn't a big deal, this was the Game Boy 2. But it was really just a Game Boy. They went from this to this and gave it a little bit better graphics. Thank you to Viaim for sponsoring this video. Do you have a lot of meetings or calls for work? Viaim RecDot earbuds can help. They're not your ordinary wireless earbuds. And here's how you can use them to take meetings to the next level.
The RecDot's flash record feature lets you easily live record any meeting, whether it's in a small conference room, in person, a phone call, a video chat. I personally have been using it because I'm taking some online classes. I use it to dictate and transcribe my classes for me, which is pretty great. All you have to do is press one button and you're recording. And you don't have to worry about external notifications interrupting you if you're recording on your phone.
It's smart enough to format for you, and you can highlight important segments for future reference during recording. It can also provide translation in 15 languages.
And after your meeting is through, Viaim AI can extract a to-do list and summary from your transcript so you can get right to work.
In a noisy environment, RecDot features 4-mic noise cancellation for calls, including a bone mic that picks up your voice through your skull to deliver even clearer audio to whoever you're talking to.
These are also just really good headphones. I really enjoy using them, so when you're done working, you just have a great sounding pair of headphones to listen to music to. Are you ready to do your meetings on easy mode? Well, check out the link in the description, and thank you again to Viaim for sponsoring today's episode.
If it was just me doing this list by myself, I would put it one notch below the DS. I would go with C.
Whoa!
I would go with C.
Whoa! Look, my little worm light saw more action than you ever have, all right?
What do you mean by that?
We were in the trenches of the backseat of the car at night.
Oh, for playing Game Boy.
And
Yeah,
I got the worm light.
You're describing a deficiency with this product. You couldn't see the screen. I will give you B on this. I can't. Dude, you cannot say this is S or even A.
Can you put it on the top of B? Can we do this? Look, there's
That makes you feel better, sure.
There's the UN at work right there. Gamers never compromise. I'm not gonna shake your hand after that spitting in my face.
Fine, then you go next. Oh, that looks like a DS.
The Virtual Boy.
Before we just immediately put this in F tier out of principle, let's talk about it for a second. The Virtual Boy was released in 95, I think. It was incredibly ahead of its time. I would very much say too far ahead of its time. This was VR before VR was remotely
You could be
ready.
ahead of your time and still be wrong. Name one Virtual Boy that you've ever seen that doesn't have a broken stand.
Oh, yeah, of course. But
Name one, yeah, like...
Yeah, but it's way more than that. So I'll say the screens didn't look bad, but it was very low resolution, very sort of basic kind of game, stuff like Mario Tennis. I think it was just using like a little like red light that would go back and forth really fast, which kind of, I know gave a lot of people headaches, but for short periods of time and a Virtual Boy that has not died like most of them have at this point, I would say it actually was vaguely cool. Good ideas. Too early, don't make them necessarily good ideas. Far and away
So you just
from being
described
ready.
a bad idea. So we're gonna put this at F.
Before you do that, I think it's worth a D. Hold on, just hear me out here.
What?
It's worth a D because while it was not great, it was Nintendo trying something unique. It had some redeeming qualities.
You're describing every Nintendo product.
When I'm drinking these things, there's a little bit of nostalgia, but a lot of it for me is like cultural relevance and importance and sort of technical sort of breakthroughs. And while it scores low on most of those, the screens did look pretty good. It was actual 3D.
Cool. Did anyone enjoy it? No. You can't be like, oh, the screens are so good, and then be like, and also it made you sick.
Okay, fine.
It did not survive the sands of time.
I argue my case.
Every other item on this list, you can go and play today and have the same amount of enjoyment.
All right. The Switch! Oh boy! I will say, now that we have exited the Switch era and begun the Switch 2 era, I think this is going to go down as one of the most important consoles of all time. Think about where Nintendo were when the Switch came out. They were coming off of the incredible lows of the Wii U generation. Smartphones were absolutely the thing that Nintendo were totally afraid of, was gonna like eat their whole lunch. Probably the roughest spot they've been in the modern era. They basically kill off the 3DS, they kill off the Wii U, they combine both into a single console. This is a little gaming tablet that brought Joy-Cons, it brought relatively high performance, and while it was not the most powerful device, importantly it was using a very modern chip, which meant that you had these incredible, like impossible ports that came to it. They might not have looked great, but they ran on this in a way that you did not, like no one would have expected when this thing came out in 2017. I will say that it's not an S tier for me, but it definitely belongs on the upper echelon of, I think this is gonna age really well, and it really has sort of changed the trajectory of the gaming industry.
In 2017, when I was a much naiver man, I looked at like something like a Vita or a PSP, which I had loved. I'm like, you know what? This is a new version of this, but Nintendo, this unlimited potential with the Switch. Every year that it was out, I think it squandered its potential. In 2017, I would have told you this is S tier.
What did the Switch not deliver on? The Switch was a
Something
good console.
other than a Mario game. It's like, oh, we're finally gonna get we could finally get a great Pokemon game. The original.
There's been a lot of Switch Pokemon games.
Yeah, and they all suck.
Watch your mouth.
Breath of the Wild was a masterpiece. But Breath of the Wild was on Wii U. I think this aged poorly.
I don't think that's.
I think this has been on life support for a while. Oh my god.
No. Matt, you're a little gumpy right now. Why don't you grab Switch 2?
Switch 2 had 3.4 million sales the opening week, which I think is amazing. And
a lot of consoles.
No one thought that this was gonna sell poorly.
Okay, please articulate.
The only reason that the Switch was able to sell that many of them is because the Switch Pro, which is what the Switch 2 actually is, has been in production for years. So if they just said, oh, this is a Switch Pro, they wouldn't have sold 3.4 million of them. I'm not saying this is the only reason they sold a lot, but they wouldn't have sold so many in the opening week if they hadn't stockpiled these for years, showing just how old the Switch 2 is.
I actually think you're mostly correct. I think maybe not. They probably didn't start making these 4 years ago, but they definitely had a good head start. Every console launch ever is going to sell out unless you somehow make 30 million consoles, right? But no one does that. It's early for the Switch 2, so I think whatever ranking you give this is going to be very tentative. To me, it feels very much like the argument I was just making with the Game Boy Advance. Solid update. It's hard to point out a lot of flaws with the Switch 2. There are definitely flaws, don't get me wrong. Generally speaking, it's the Switch, but better. Surprise, surprise.
Where are you putting that?
C tier.
Okay.
I think C tier, but very tentatively. I think it could go up or down. My guess is it's probably going to land in B.
I still say that Switch is B.
Now that you got all your gumpiness out, let's do something a little bit happier. The Game Boy Color.
It had a nice badunkadunk. It just felt like a slightly better Game Boy.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it, because the original Game Boy came out in 1989. The Game Boy Color didn't come out to 1998. So it was incredibly old by the time this thing finally came out. This was just an overclocked Game Boy with a color display, but still not a very good one and still not backlit. I will say the only thing that really pushes this up for me is a deep well of nostalgia, because this was my first Game Boy, pushing it up from the very sort of bottom tiers. I'm just like a little bit more. Like it gives it like a little half point. I'm like somewhere between C and D on this. I'm being reasonable.
I'll give you D.
Okay, see, look, we're fine here. Okay, I feel okay with tier list is taking shape.
NES.
Oh boy. Okay, I never had an NES as a child because
I did.
You're old and I'm not.
Anything you have to blow to make it work. That's not even euphemism. That's a documented fact.
Most people think about the first real console was the NES.
I'm gonna give this a C.
I actually agree with C. GameCube.
I have very little opinion on GameCube because I never had one.
The GameCube was the last time that Nintendo really went head-to-head with everybody, right? And to be fair, they lost. The GameCube was relatively powerful. It finally moved over to discs. You had a good controller. I think we still all play with GameCube controllers today.
I would say the GameCube controller is probably my favorite controller that's ever been made.
The main thing was, after the GameCube, Nintendo totally changed up their strategy. And honestly, it was probably the right move. This is the end of Nintendo really trying to go head-to-head with everyone else. History has not been super kind to the GameCube, even though I think a lot of people have nostalgia for it. I do think if we're looking at the heavy hitters on this list, I would go C on this.
So we got the Game Boy Advance SP, by your logic, is at C.
Go ahead, please finish that sentence.
It had a hinge that broke. It needed a charger.
As opposed to throwing piles of AA batteries in the trash can.
No remote. No remote was safe. If you were on the go, like I was a young entrepreneur, the batteries would die, and I could just be like, you know what? I see someone's smoke detector. Let me get some batteries out of there. You can't do that with an SP.
Let me tell you why you're wrong. The Game Boy Advance, as we've established by the fact that it's in B, very good console, but it had a lot of flaws, and the SP fixed almost all of them. The SP, you had both a front and backlit screen, you had a rechargeable battery, you had a clamshell design, which meant it was super, super portable. The SP was everything about the Game Boy Advance, except significantly better.
I argue that I liked the batteries more than I wanted.
Well, I argue you're not right. A.
All right. 3DS.
I think that a lot of people have nostalgia for the 3DS.
I'm gonna say C.
Whoa, you can't just go straight out for it.
I'm going to.
Walk me through it.
The 3D was terrible, so everyone just turn it off. If the main feature of your device is something you just turn off, I think it's bad.
$250. They had to cut the price to $170 like 6 months later. And remember, they gave everyone like free like Game Boy games or whatever in like the emulator store. But here's the thing. I think that Nintendo follows a pretty like tried and tested playbook. They bring out something. It's cool and innovative and great. And then they just revise until it stops working, and then they redo the playbook again. I agree with you that the 3D was not great. The 3DS was a better version of the DS in most ways. I will say that C feels very fair to the 3DS because it was a good console. Besides F, everything is good here. But the 3DS just didn't do anything that was that
Remember, this is all in a vacuum. Right. Go ahead.
Oh, well, 2DS.
Here's my argument.
Yep.
B.
I totally agree. The 2DS to me was everything about the 3DS, but better. It got rid of the 3D screen. Who cared? While the screens are a little bit mid by today's standards, they're still fine. This thing was $100.
I got mine for $50, brand new.
If you're like a big boy adult and you got, big hands, this is actually really comfortable to play with. If I'm gonna play a 3DS game right now, I'm probably gonna play on a 2DS because it's the most comfortable way to play. I think this is actually very similar to the Game Boy Advance SP in a lot of ways, in that it is the 3DS, but cheaper and or better and or improved
in every way.
I think people are going to be a little upset that we're going to put the 2DS above things like the Switch 2, the GameCube, and the ES.
Okay. This is our tier list. You want to do one, you make a tier list. All right. Switch Lite. No, I'm going to put that one down.
Bring it back. Switch Lite, baby. I didn't know this was going to be on the list. Oh,
I refuse to give you S.
I love the Switch Lite. It is my favorite version of the Switch, mostly because it is a solid single-piece console. And as much as I've liked the Joy-Cons on the Switch, I never liked the mechanism on the original ones. It always felt too wiggly. For me, I actually very, very rarely ever docked the Switch. It was really a handheld console for me. So losing that I mean, it was a little bit annoying, but like didn't really bother me. This is still the cheapest console you can buy right now. So you can still buy a Switch Lite right now for $200. If you want to just play some games and have a good time, $200 I think is still a strong deal. However, I can also be fair and unbiased here, and that I think the vast majority of people would rather have the slightly larger Switch, which has the Joy-Cons, which has the docking capability, all that kind of stuff, and it's only like $100 difference. As much as I'm a Switch Lite lover, I can acknowledge that it's not as good as the regular Switch for most people, so I would say this is B as well.
All right.
After you, my friend.
The Game Boy Lite.
The Game Boy Lite, if you're unaware, was the Japanese-only Game Boy.
I asked for this one just because I wanted this so bad as a kid.
The problem was it came out right before the Game Boy Color, which immediately made it obsolete. And the screen was lit, but it was lit in the same way that Matt's lit on a Thursday night. I'll be honest, this gotta be a D tier.
Just like Austin, it's not very bright.
What do you mean by that? We would like to play.
I can't say too much negative about the Wii.
I can. It's aged poorly. I think that's the biggest downside. The motion controls were really a phenomenon when it first came out. While it was exciting at the time, I think that the Wii had a very high sort of gimmick factor. The motion controls were not very good.
No.
You might remember them being good, but guess what? Try one now. You'll realize they're not
like
good.
Wii Sports was good.
The controllers are not impressive compared to any sort of more modern sort of motion controls. It didn't output HD, means it looks kind of bad on pretty much every TV. The Wii definitely earned some points for being incredibly popular. I still think it's the most popular like regular console they sold, not like counting like something handheld. I mean, there were some good Wii games, don't get me wrong, but like I would say that there was a very high proportion of shovelware. If we ignore the cultural relevance and we just talk about like what I did, I would put Wii in D tier. But because it sold so well and because there were some things, I could go up to C.
I would say B. Well, you just.
It's C. Wii U. Give it to me. Let's go. Let's do it.
In retrospection.
And
thinking about it. I think we've been too hard on the Wii U. I think that the Wii U has aged still poorly.
Yeah, okay. We're back on track.
I agree that the gamepad should have been just an attachment for the regular Wii.
Yeah.
I think that Mario Party on the Wii U was probably the best Mario Party, me personally, where you could like cheat as Bowser. Whoever was playing Bowser was playing their own game and no one could see it because they had their own screen. I thought that those kinds of things were really, really cool. This is where I got mad because I'm like, oh, only a small handful of things took advantage of this. And then they abandoned it when the Switch came out. I won't give it F. I refuse to give it F. I will give it D.
Okay, cool. So we're in D for Wii U. Can I just say, there are a couple of heavy hitters that we have not gotten to. I think we're about to come to fisticuffs for the S tier. It's really hard to pick up. N64. Have you ever had three hands? Because boy, oh boy, have I got the controller for you.
Look, this is where I'm going to be controversial. I do not like Super Mario 64 at all.
I feel like you just said a series of words that have never been spoken in the English language before. Think about the time.
Yeah, I am thinking about the time. I'm thinking about at the same time, I was playing Crash Bandicoot. I was playing Spyro the Dragon. I thought those looked better. Okay,
Mario 64 was not the most incredible looking game of all time. Any objective person can say that was a really
There's a
revolutionary
reason people
game.
are like, hey, we should upgrade these textures because they're not good. And then Nintendo sued them. All of my love for N64 comes from college, playing a game called Don't Drink and Drive. We would play Mario Kart.
Oh my God.
And everyone would have a beer per lap. You had to finish your beers before you finish the race.
I have a technique thinking about this.
You cannot be consuming the beer while moving the vehicle. The rule was you had to pull over on the side of the road. You had to be on the side of the road. You could not be in the road at all.
Yeah. I don't know what to do with this information, but I'm glad I have it. N64 was good. I feel like a strong like C to me. You're up. Man, C tier is a crowded tier.
The Game & Watch. Ooh.
It was a gaming device that I would say is a little bit closer to a toy because it was using a little LCD.
I just think that every Tiger Electronics game did it better.
I'm a D on this, I think.
I was gonna go F. I'm just gonna put it there because I can. I have that ability.
Okay, well then whatever you pick and you like, I'm gonna put an F because I have that ability.
Oh, really? The Game Boy DMG. This is S tier.
S tier.
S tier.
Are we agreeing on this?
I'm not shaking your hand.
Okay. If you try to play an original DMG today, that green display has not aged well. The Game Boy I think scores so highly on almost every other metric, though. You can't even really ding it for like screen and performance that much because in context, this thing came out in late 1989. You can make a very, very strong argument. And in fact, the sort of, the world did that by spending less money on a Game Boy, you were getting more cool games and a better overall experience that lasted longer. Those other consoles, while they existed and they were fine, they pushed the technology too far. In hindsight, you can point out a lot of things that it could have done better. But I would say by that same token, if you want to use the benefit of hindsight, not only did Nintendo continuously, after a few years of being sort of lazy and making the Virtual Boy, they improved it with the Game Boy Pocket and then obviously with the Game Boy Color and whatnot. But also today, if you want to really enjoy a DMG, you can fairly easily swap in a better screen, problem solved. So I think it's a strong S tier. What's our last item? What are we missing here?
The SNES. Could have said this was S tier. I won't.
But hold on, think about
graphics
it.
were amazing for the time.
This was the pinnacle of pixel-based graphics.
My issue with the NES was that you could go to an arcade and play a better game. SNES is when it started to feel like you didn't need to go to an arcade to get those levels.
I think it's high, but there were some major points against it. Again, think about it. We put NES in C tier.
Yeah.
This is just a better version of the NES, which I agree. I mean, that bumps above C.
I put NES in C tier because it was a piece of shit that like kept breaking down. I would have said the same thing about Atari. Just because it's important doesn't mean it's good.
You think it's more important than the Game Boy Advance?
Yeah.
You think it's better than DS?
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely better than Switch Lite and 2DS. Kenzie, where are you at on this? We need a tiebreaker here. I feel like it's B.
I never played it.
Okay, fine.
Hey.
Fine. No, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. If you move it down here, we've successfully built the bell curve. That's pretty nice.
Let us know what your tier list looks like for the Nintendo.
Probably not this.
Yeah, love to hear your feedback so much. Like, follow, subscribe. We'll catch you in the next one. What systems are you be blowing on this weekend?
Probably my Switch 2. I'm trying to get banned. I'm halfway there. There was a fight on my flight the other night. I'm just chilling, minding my business as you do, and I hear like some like commotion. So I pop my earbud out, and there is a lady screaming at someone else. But there's a lot of very choice words being used, some accusations being thrown. There's like an army of flight attendants who come up and like trying to figure out what's going on. They have to go get the pilot because we haven't left yet. They separate the two ladies. So they put one of the ladies up front. She got a free upgrade to first class, which I was like, dang, I want to start some fights on planes more often. They had to go back over and get the other lady and pull her off. And she's like yelling, and she like walks up to the front, and then right as she's about to like be escorted off the plane, she goes, wait, but I gotta go home. And then the flight attendant was like, sorry, you gotta get off this plane.
I definitely would have stirred that pot. If I had a nickel for every time a guy next to me shit his pants on a flight, I'd have 2 nickels.